I've been on the lookout for an anamorphic lens that I can use with my Sony camera for the longest time, and I think I finally found it. Hey guys, I'm Danny, your friendly neighbor colorist, and in this video we are going to be talking about this, which is a SIRUI 40mm T1.8 anamorphic lens for Sony E-mount. And it's also available in other mounts as well, such as the Micro Four Thirds, Nikon Z mount, and also Fujifilm X mount. So what's so special about this lens is it's one of the first lenses on the market that is anamorphic and has autofocus features built into it. Most of the anamorphic lenses before this is using manual focus, which is not very practical if you're a solo creator and you don't have someone behind the lens to pull focus for you when you're on a go. And that's one of the reasons why I've been very reluctant to get myself an anamorphic lens, because if there's no one pulling focus for me, there is a limitation to the shots that I can get, or I have to pull focus manually whenever I'm shooting. So with this release of this autofocus anamorphic lens, I think it's gonna break a lot of barriers to shoot in anamorphic in our prosumer cameras like the Sony FX3, which I'm shooting on right now. So before we go any further, some of the footage that you see in this video and also other footage as well, which I shot in Japan, are available in the link in the description below, so you can test them out, you can see the characteristics of this lens, and you can also color grade them and practice with them. I just hope you like this video and subscribe to the channel, then you have my permission to download them. So going back to the lens, it has a full metal body and it weighs around 600 grams. On the body itself, you have your autofocus and manual focus switch, and on the other side, you have the aperture click, whether you want it off or on. There's also an autofocus lock button here, which is very useful if you want to quickly lock the focus. So of course, you also have your aperture ring, which goes from T1.8 to T22. In the front, you have a 77mm filter thread, and I have a UV filter here right now, and I just put it on to protect the lens so that it doesn't crack that easily. So this lens is built for Super 35 sensor size, but you can also use this for APS-C and full frame cameras. Just that when you're shooting on full frame cameras, you might see a little bit of vignetting outside, which I will go to later on in the video. So the lens doesn't have any built-in stabilization, which you can see on this clip. My hands are slightly shaking, which is something that you might not want. But once I turn on the active stabilization in my Sony FX3, then it gets a lot better, so don't worry about that. And you can have a look at the characteristics that this lens brings out. So the lens has very nice oval-shaped bokeh on the edges. It's sort of swirly, right? Something you get out of a vintage lens, which is very cool. And the other thing that you have to know about this lens is don't expect the sharpest of image. So I'm not expecting something from a Sony 50mm GM lens, which is super sharp. The reason that we get an anamorphic lens is so that we get the characteristics from the lens which you can't imitate in the grading process. And with these characteristics in the footage itself, it's just so much easier to mimic shooting on film, right? If you want to go for a look like that. If you're shooting on super clean lens, it's gonna take a lot to dirt up the footage in order to mimic that film emulation look. With this lens, you just slap on a little bit of halation and also film grain, then you get an awesome look right out of the box. So there's actually two options of the color of the flare that you can pick for this lens. The one I picked is blue, and the other one that's available is neutral. So of course, for me, I'm going for a more stylistic look, a more Michael Bay kind of look. So I'll go with the blue color flare. And from what I heard, this flare is not too overpowering. It doesn't really get in your face and disrupt the whole frame itself. But the other thing that I don't really like is the artifacts that comes with the flare together, which is these little green spots that you see over here. And another thing that I found with this lens is if you focus on something in the closer focal range, you see this oval or circular shape appearing on the edges. And this is kind of cool actually, but it's because this lens is not made for full frame, and I'm shooting everything on full frame over here. So if you crop into APS-C or Super 35, you don't actually see that circular shape appearing on the outsides of the frame. So if you're shooting on APS-C, it's gonna crop in 1.5 times to around a 60 focal length instead of the 40 millimeters rated on the lens itself, which is the full frame equivalent. So I'm gonna do a quick grade for this clip over here, which you can see the characteristics of the lens shining through the background, right? We have a very nice oval bokeh here, and it's focusing very softly on the subject. So there's a slight bit of chromatic aberration, but I don't really mind that at all if I'm reaching for this lens. So I know it's not going to be a super clean lens. So all I'm doing in the primaries is just going into the color slice and adding a bit of saturation. So this is subtractive saturation. And I'm also adding more saturation with my saturation slider in the primaries. And of course, for my color management, I'm using a CST, color space transform, going from Sony S-Gamma 3 Cine to S-Log 3, and then outputting to Rec. 709 Gamma 2.4. So this is a very natural look right off the bat. We can see the full characteristics of the lens. And if you want something quick and easy for creative adjustments, I have my Colorist Vote Creative LUTs available. So I have 17 LUTs which are meant for Rec. 709. And you can apply it very easily on the footage, such as in this note, I have my Hollywood LUT, which gives me a little bit of blue shadows and warm highlights. I also have something like High Key to give me a lighter look if I turn this on and off. So this is set to 50% in the key output gain. If I reset this to 100%, you'll see that it goes from a very toned down, very natural look to a very up key or high key look, which is suiting for this image. And if your footage is on the darker side like this, you can apply the Hollywood LUT. So I'm going to turn this on and put it up to 100%. And it gives you a finished look so easily. So blue in the shadows and warm in the highlights. Like this, very quickly. There are also other options in my Colorist Vote pack, which is Cine Green. So you have a greener shadow, or you can use Equino if you're a very toned down look. So this is also a very nice look on itself. If you're interested in this Colorist Vote Creative LUT pack, you can go to the link down in the description to check them out. So overall for the lens, I'm pretty happy with it, except for two things. The first one is the autofocus. It only works if you don't desqueeze your image in camera. I know some cameras, maybe they don't have the option to desqueeze in camera, but for my Sony FX3, I do actually have the option for that. And if I desqueeze, the autofocus doesn't work at all. So if I want to view the desqueeze image in my camera when I'm shooting, I have to forego the autofocus function and go for manual focus myself. And I really hope that SIRUI makes an update so that I can use both simultaneously without having to sacrifice one over the other, because shooting and viewing in anamorphic is very enjoyable. And that's something that I get to realize when I'm shooting on this lens. It's so fun. And you don't get that on most lenses. Like I'm shooting on a 35mm, that's quite fun. On a 24-70 G Master, it's kind of a very workhorse lens. So it's mostly not fun at all in a sense. It's very practical, very versatile, but not fun. This is a super fun lens that you can shoot with. So I won't be surprised if I'm picking this over the other lenses that I have during my content creation trips. And lastly, the second issue is the autofocus noise, which is kind of apparent. You hear it from the camera itself, but if you're a little bit of a distance away, you don't actually hear it. So if you're interested to get this lens, it's priced at 800 USD or 4,000 ringgit, which is very cheap for a prime autofocus anamorphic lens of its kind. And you can get them with the link in my description below. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.